A beating heart, a functioning liver, or healthy kidney, these are all things that we take for granted until they stop working. April is National Donate Life Month, and it's the month that we're reminded that the legacy we leave could become the life for someone else. We're joined today by representatives from the Gift of Life Donor Program to talk about organ donation and the questions that so many of us have about the program and what happens to our organs when we leave them. They'll be joining us to answer those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. April is National Donate Life Month, and it's the month where we're reminded of the legacy that we can leave, that the legacy we leave could become someone else's life. And that is the heartbeat, both literal and figurative, behind the Gift of Life Donor Program. We're joined tonight by Dwendy Johnson, who serves as Community Relations Supervisor for that program here in Pennsylvania. Dwendy, welcome to Face the Issues.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Very good.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I know it's a busy month. Obviously, this is the month where we remind everybody of organ donation and tissue donation. So I know things are busy for you, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Let me start just from the very, very top. I mean, April is National Donate Life Month. You work for the Gift of Life Donor Program. Can you just tell us what your program does, what your organization does?
Mm-hmm. So Gift of Life Donor Program is the region's organ procurement agency. So what we do is we collaborate with hospitals and work to assure that family members that have said yes to organ donation can give that gift of life through organ and tissue.
So you're a nonprofit organization and you partner with the different hospitals and medical groups throughout the region.
That is correct, yeah. We service half of Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, and the state of Delaware.
Oh wow, okay, that's right in our viewing area.
Absolutely.
One of the questions I think that comes up a lot, I think when people think organ donation, right, the first thing they think of is those two words in your driver's license, right? That's kind of the picture that everybody has. But obviously people think, okay, if I pass and my heart is working, it can be donated. And then there's also the side of there's people who donate a kidney while they're still alive, because we have two. But there's also tissue donation. So this isn't just if you die and you can leave your organs. Talk to me about the different kinds of donations that your organization works with.
Right. So someone today could actually, when they register at the driver's license center, or when they share their decision with their family members, they can actually help save their lives through organ donation, which would be 8 organs, solid organs. And then they could help enhance people's lives through tissue donation. And when we say tissue, it would be skin and bones, saphenous veins, heart valves, even corneas to give someone eyesight. So that is another opportunity that someone could have. So someone could help save or enhance the lives of well over 75 to 100 people through all of those donations. And then like you mentioned earlier, the fact that we can be a living donor. So we help assist with those coordination of living donation, but that's primarily through the hospitals, the transplant centers, such as Lehigh Valley. They partake in that as well.
Yeah, there's such an interesting thing when you think of organ donating. And I was recently at a local hospital, and I was not in the hospital, but the room that I was in overlooked the helipad, and there was actually a chopper that came in, and it was actually transporting it was to pick up an organ, and you could see the doctors bring it out in that box. And there's this heaviness of somebody has passed, that somebody's lost their life, and yet there is this beauty in the sense that someone else is just hours away from getting a new lease on life. And there was just this, it was a very emotional thing. I had no idea who either of the patients were, but just watching that from that window was very emotional. And I think really kind of just gave it a gravity to the work that you guys do day in and day out. I want to ask you about a lot of the confusion that comes around organ donating. You already cleared up one, which is sometimes you can be a living donor depending on what organ it is, such as a kidney. There's a lot of confusion about if you're too old, have your organs aged out, or do we have to match races or medical history? Right? If you had passed of a medical condition, are your organs no longer good? You probably hear all of these all the time. Let's just start with age. Does age affect? Is there a certain age in which you can't donate anymore?
No, and actually our oldest donor was 97 years old. That was in West Virginia this past year that actually was able to donate. So when we tell people if they're concerned about age or even concerned about medical issues, we just tell them to register themselves, and at the time of their death, tests will be determined whether or not the organ is healthy enough for transplant.
I think that's one of the concerns with age, that someone thinks, well, if they're 97 years old and they're giving a liver, for example, what if that liver is 97 years old? So all the organs are tested before they're sent to the new patient.
Absolutely, because we want to make sure that those individuals that are waiting for a life-saving organ, that those organs are healthy for them.
Sure.
They're already on a wait list waiting however long for their transplant. So receiving that healthy organ will make their life much better.
Yeah. I guess a similar question then with the medical history. And I think the concern here comes from if someone had cancer or diabetes, are their organs bad? I'm assuming this goes through that same kind of testing or examining of the organ before it goes on. And so organs that are not transplantable are not going to be moved on.
Right, exactly. So there's many tests that we do to make sure that those organs are viable for transplant. Many years ago, there was a thought that HIV patients could not donate, but now we can donate. Yeah. So I just tell everybody, if that is their wish to become an organ donor, please mark that on their driver's license or their living will, and let their family know their wishes.
Sure. Yeah. Talk to me about the concern or the myth that people have with race and ethnicity playing into organ donating. Where does that come from, and how do you address that?
Yeah, so what we say is anyone can be an organ donor. Just keep in mind that all inside, we're all the same,
that's true.
Right? So so we really look at that opportunity that we have and educate in all of our communities about the need for organ donation.
Is that one that you see a lot come up? Are there people who are, either are concerned that they're getting an organ that's from someone who's not the same race or ethnicity?
No.
Okay.
The thing that we see a lot of is if I have organ donation on my license, that the medical field will not try to save me.
Oh, okay. And I've heard that concern before. Yeah. What do you say to someone who has that fear?
Just keeping in mind that our medical teams are in the hospital are separate from the organ donation recovery teams. So keeping in mind that someone gets transported to the hospital or involved in an accident or whatever, those medical people are doing everything possible to try to save their life. And then when that is not possible anymore, then organ donation is an option.
And when that time comes, if that time comes, the medical team there in the ER, for example, they're not the ones that are doing the organ procurement. So it's two different teams, two different systems.
Yes, exactly. And we collaborate with the hospitals and work together to make sure that opportunity that family has to give their loved one a legacy to help save someone else's life.
Yeah.
And so we work together to do that, to make those things happen.
Well, Diane, you just said that it's the idea of a legacy that every person talks about the legacy they leave, and we generally think of it in the wealth that you leave or the buildings that are named after you and so forth. But the legacy of as you leave the earth, you actually give someone else a second chance to live their life. And we've all seen those reunion videos of people donor families and recipients coming together. I want to ask you about the donor lists. How if someone thinks they need an organ, how do they get on this donor list or the wait lists?
Right. So, of course, through their medical doctors, they would determine, when and if a time, and they would reach out to a specialist a transplant specialist, and then at that time, evaluations are determined, and then they determine, putting the person on the list.
So to get on the list, you are submitted by a doctor or a hospital.
Exactly.
And then there are rules, right, for recipients, or as you're on the wait list, there are rules that you need to live by in order to stay on the list, right? And the one that everyone thinks of is if you're in for a liver transplant, you can't be actively an alcoholic or actively drinking or doing something that would damage your liver. These are, I'm assuming different organs have different rules that those on the list need to play by, or they will get skipped over.
Well, when you're placed on that list, there are protocols and different things that they have to abide by, and that's through the transplant centers. They determine that and sit down with the family and really go over that opportunity and the steps that are made to keeping themselves as healthy as possible, so that they can be ready for that transplant.
Wendy, we hear a lot about how people on lists wait a long time, and sometimes they wait the rest of their life. And this is always the sense in which when the organ becomes available, there are hundreds, thousands of people all over the country that are on that list, and you're in an order. Why is there such a shortage of organs? And what do you say to people who potentially could be donors about how they can contribute to shortening that list a bit?
Absolutely. So there's over 106,000 people nationwide. Wow. And within our region that we cover.
That's for the different organs?
Yes. Okay. And all ages. And in our region alone, we're looking at a little over 5,000 people.
Wow.
So what we really need to do is to help educate our community, help them understand the opportunity that we have when we pass away is, like I said earlier, leave that legacy, give someone else a second chance. And by educating ourselves and registering to be an organ donor, we can get that number down and get those people off of that list.
Why do you think it's so? A few years ago, we had on someone from Miller Keystone Blood Center and talked about blood donations. And they're always at a shortage, but there's a sense in which you see so many people regularly come and give blood. Why do you think that number dwindles when it comes to organ donation? Is there a hesitancy there?
I just think it's education. If we would educate ourselves and learn more about the need and how easy it is to just register ourselves, I see that over the years. Someone that is going to the driver's license center, that is where you can register to become an organ donor. Or you can do it as simply on our health app of our phone. And it's done.
So the more people know, education is the work, is what you're saying. The more people know, the more donors we'll have.
Right, exactly.
Last question for you, Wendy. The cost, right, to give an organ, or even the recipient. How much, what's the cost to a family during this whole process?
There is no cost at all. When a family has said yes to organ donation, all of those costs that are testing and processing and all of that.
Because it's a long process.
Yes. And so that is all occurred by us. For someone that is receiving the organ, of course, insurance, their health insurance would be involved with that too. So through the transplant centers, they would work with their social worker on that end. But for a donor family saying yes to organ donation from that point on, it's all occurred to us.
Wow. And then I lied about last question. One more question for you. Again, somebody wants to sign up to be an organ donor. DMV is a real easy way to do it. But let's say someone wants to learn more about your organization or potentially even donate financially. As you said, these costs are incurred by you. What's the website again, one more time?
So it's donors1.org.
Donors, the number one.
The number one.org. And then you can also easily register too through our website as well. So there's a little button right at the top of our website that says register, and you just click.
So you can even save a trip to the DMV and just go right to donors1.org.
Yep.
Wendy, thank you for joining us, but also for the work that you do day in, day out, year after year. To your point, education's the core of this, and I just appreciate that your tireless efforts to keep doing that.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Don't go away. When we come back, we're going to sit down with someone who 2 decades ago was the recipient of that new lease on life. And we're going to hear his story when we come back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues, and we're now joined by Frank Garger, an organ donation recipient himself, and currently an ambassador for the Gift of Life donor program. Frank, thank you for joining us, and welcome to Face the Issues.
Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you here, and we were talking before the show that it's one thing to come and talk about the ins and outs, which are important because people need to know, but it's always different when somebody isn't just a talking point and they've actually lived it, and this is your life. And yes. So, Frank, first question, how long has it been? Well, what, if you're willing to say, what organ was it and how long has it been since?
I am a liver transplant recipient, and May 5th will be my 20th birthday with my new lease on life, gift of life, I should say.
Wow, so 20 years.
It is.
And you mind saying how old you were when you got it?
I was 35.
Okay. You look good for your age. I would not have pegged you as being in your 50s. So.
Thank you very much.
That's incredible, 20 years.
Yes.
Talk to us about what led to your need for this organ, and yeah, start there. What led to the need for this?
At the age of 3, I started becoming jaundiced, just like a newborn baby, and the yellowing of the skin, the jaundice, and the severe itching that went along with that, and was taken to different doctors, pediatricians. And one specialist that I was told by my parents that said that I had narrowing of the bile ducts, that they were narrower than what they should be, and nationwide there were less than a dozen or 20 cases nationwide. Wow. And they told my parents that I would not live to see my teen years because other children, young people like myself at that time was not looking good.
Wow. And you were 3 then?
I was 3 years old.
And then it's 30 plus years before the transplant.
Correct.
What happened those intervening years? Did you not need the new liver right away, or?
No, not right away. I would have episodes of the severe jaundice.
Sure.
This dry skin was always with me throughout my whole life until my transplant. And throughout the whole time, it would be the jaundice, yellowing of the eyes, dark amber color, when you go to urinate, also that went along with that. But it would have episodes that would last from 3 to 6 months, then it would go away.
Okay.
Then I would be completely normal, and then it would be good for quite a couple of years, and then maybe another episode every so often.
Wow. How hard was it growing up like that? I mean, it's one thing when you're in your 50s and you experience something, you have kids now and you've lived life and you think, okay, I can deal with something. It's a lot different when you're growing up with this.
It was not knowing what happened or how did this happen or come about. Did I do something wrong, or whatever. But, I was ridiculed because of the condition. But I learned to live with it. I was always active, try to be active, outdoors, sports or working, with whatever. Yeah. But it was tough sometimes during high school.
Sure.
During the high school years, being ridiculed and, neighborhood people, kids also.
Yeah. Kids can be cruel.
It was, but once again, grew a tougher skin, so to
say,
in these days.
Yeah, well, I mean, silver lining, right? The silver lining.
Exactly.
So did your doctors then look to manage it with other treatments?
It was just a type of a powder form that it was mixed in with either milk or like orange juice or like a high-C Kool-Aid type of thing that would try and keep it in check for all those years. But we knew growing up, transplant would be eventually down the road.
Okay.
And even when I was first diagnosed with this, my parents asked the doctors, is transplant, taking part of their livers, but at that time, back in 1970, it was just in its infancy stages with the doctors and the treatments that were there. Right.
And that points to one of the things I think people don't always understand about organ donating, that it's a last ditch. It's not, I won't say last ditch, but it's the last thing that is done. And doctors will always try to first manage the condition before they put you in for an organ donation.
Correct.
And you're saying that's essentially what your life was like growing up.
Correct. Like I said, we always knew this day might come, but you never expected it to come so soon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm assuming it got worse and it escalated. So what happened in those years leading up to when you needed it?
When I was going through different specialists, a gastroenterologist, even traveling down to Philadelphia, either Thomas Jefferson Hospital or Albert Einstein Hospital, where my transplant was, I was put on the donor list, but because my condition never warranted, to be that high up on the list, that once again, just treating with drugs. And then in May, I should say, the holidays of 2001, 2002, I started feeling slowly progressing downhill. And while I was going through the transplant testing to be placed on that list, is when they noticed that my gallbladder was enlarged, inflamed, and that there was fluid building up, and I was put into the hospital. And when they took out my gallbladder on a Thursday evening, they took a look at my liver, and they noticed that it was not going to last much longer.
Got it.
And Thursday I got my gallbladder removed, and then Saturday evening, one of the nurses came into my hospital room as I was recovering from that surgery and said, "You're being transplanted tomorrow morning."
Wow.
Sunday morning.
Wow.
Which was a kind of a shock because I was still recuperating from this one. But during those 3 days, I was in and out, so to say, because my condition was progressing, getting worse. And then Sunday morning, there I was, 6 o'clock, being wheeled in for the transplant.
That's a quick turnaround.
It was, but it just progressed so fast during those last couple of months, March, April, May, until that, I was really going downhill. And once again, it was sad that, somebody has to be in a worst case scenario, worse situation to get placed on the higher up on the list. But it was desperate times.
So that's how you got moved up the list.
Exactly.
Conditions got worse.
Correct.
The gallbladder situation, was that related to your liver? Or?
They never said yes or no, but I don't think so. So it was just something that triggered the gallbladder to start collecting fluid, and it was enlarged.
You talked earlier about silver linings, and it almost seems like the gallbladder saved your life.
Correct. It triggered something that, to be put into that situation. And thank God there was a donor available. And my donor was a 75-year-old gentleman that passed away that I received.
You mentioned that, in our last segment we talked about, sometimes there's this fear of, well, my donor's older, my donor's younger. You were 35, your donor is 40 years older than you.
Correct.
And that liver has worked quite well, I'm assuming.
It has. I've taken every advantage to make my donor proud of living a full life. I was recently married. I just had a 3-year-old son. My wife was pregnant, actually, with our second son, 5-6 months while I was going through all of this. Not knowing what the overall outcome might be. But I was more worried about her and my children and unborn than I was, because heaven forbid if something did happen, I would be hopefully in a better place.
Sounds like a dad. Let me ask you about that. I mean, you have a 3-year-old at that time.
Correct.
Your wife is pregnant with your second. What was going through your mind when you had
the uncertainty. The uncertainty of what would happen, not being able to see the young, the newborn being born, and then to see my kids, growing up, high school, college, and so on, hopefully getting married, and so on. But it was scary, not knowing, being in that situation, having to write out a will, not knowing what might happen.
How are your kids now?
Very good, thank you. My oldest is graduating University of Pittsburgh this end of April. And my youngest is a sophomore at University of Pittsburgh also.
That's great. And again, so in the odd way, you're removing your gallbladder led to this lease on life for the last 20 years.
Exactly.
Have you, a lot of times we hear about donors who then meet the family of those who donated. Have you had the opportunity?
I have not. After transplant and after my second son was born in August, during the November, December, during the holidays, I sat down and tried to compose that letter. And there were many times that I stopped. Because how can you thank somebody for that gift that they gave me, but knowing that they ended up passing away, but thanking that family. It took a while to write that letter, but eventually that letter was written and I did send it, but I never got a response back. But I know that I'm trying to live that life with that person. Left me that second chance.
Frank, let me ask you this. We often say that we don't always know what we're willing to live for until we know what we're willing to die for. And the idea that we confront death in order to really know where our priorities in life are. You've had to do that, quite literally. Have the last 20 years of your life been different than those first 35?
I tried to, once again, live the best that I can. After transplant, I'm become more active, so to say, in our church community. With the kids, being with the sports and everything else. I'm sure I would have done that even without the transplant. Sure. But I really haven't changed anything as far as that regard. We do have to watch what we do after transplant. Being in liver transplant, no alcohol. But other than that, there's no physical restrictions on most of people that have a transplant, as myself. But I just consider myself one of the lucky ones that have been given that second chance.
I mean, there must have been a time when you were 35, 34, 33, where you said you always knew that day was coming. There must have been a time where you looked and thought, maybe this is it. And now you've had the last 20 years. What's the future look like for Frank?
Hopefully to keep on going as strong as I have been. Just to keep on, enjoying life, traveling once again with the kids, in and out of college, so to say. Traveling with my wife, 25 years of marriage now in August also.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And once again, just enjoying family and also friends, and thankful for everything that I've been given.
We were saying earlier that it's just it's such an odd thing of there's a heaviness to someone having to lose their life, and yet an ecstatic joy of someone else gaining their life. Frank, you've lived through this. What do you say to people who are watching this and say, I'm not sure if I want to become an organ donor? What's your message to them?
I always say when I do go out and speak for the gift of life, and with family and friends, if you're a caring enough person while you are here on God's given earth, what better gift than you can give to a total stranger than the gift of life?
Yeah, it's a great message. Frank, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing that journey with us. And
thank you.
Happy birthday and happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Well, my thanks to both DeWendy and to Frank for joining us. And such an important message. The legacy that you leave could be a new lease on life for someone else. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again right here next week. Until then, my name is Sam Chan. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.